What does it cost to become a legend? For John Travolta, the price was almost everything he loved. At 71 years old, he's buried his wife, his teenage son, his mother, his first love, his brother, and 3 of his closest friends. 5 of those losses came from the same disease, breast cancer, striking the women who meant the most to him like some kind of cruel pattern that refuses to break. And yet, he's still here, still flying his planes, still raising his kids, still showing up. Today we're going to walk through the full story of John Travolta, from the cramped New Jersey house where 6 kids fought for space and attention, to the disco floors that made him immortal, to the hospital rooms where he held dying loved ones in his arms. This isn't just a celebrity biography. This is a story about what happens when life keeps taking from you, and you somehow keep going anyway. But here's where it really starts. John Joseph Travolta came into the world on February 18, 1954, in Englewood, New Jersey. He was the youngest of 6 children, which meant he was basically invisible unless he made some noise. His father, Salvatore, had been a semi-professional football player before reality caught up with him. By the time John was born, Salvatore was running a small tire shop, coming home every night with grease-stained hands and just enough money to cover rent and groceries. His mother, Helen, had dreamed of being an actress and radio performer, but those dreams had faded into something else entirely. She became a drama teacher instead, channeling all that unfulfilled ambition into her children. The Travolta house was loud, crowded, and always a little bit desperate. John shared a bedroom with 2 of his brothers in a space that barely fit the beds. The refrigerator was often half empty, dinners stretched thin with pasta and bread. Every bill that came in the mail was another small crisis. Privacy didn't exist in that house, neither did silence. And John, being the youngest, learned early that if he wanted anyone to notice him, he had to perform. He danced in the living room to distract everyone from their worries. He sang the lines his mother taught him just to see her smile. He watched his older siblings rehearse for school plays and soaked up everything he could. Years later, he'd say that the chaos taught him how to stand out. But it also taught him something else, that love and struggle come packaged together, and sometimes you can't have one without the other. And that's when everything began to change. By the time John was 16, he couldn't take it anymore. The cramped rooms, the smell of rubber and sweat, the constant reminder that there was never enough. None of it felt like his life. It felt like a trap. So in November 1970, he did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He announced he was dropping out of high school to become an actor. His teachers thought he was crazy. His classmates didn't know what to make of it. But John had been saving money for months, skipping meals, walking instead of taking the bus, scraping together every dollar he could find. On December 12, 1970, he packed a battered suitcase, grabbed a worn copy of an acting handbook, and left. He had exactly $150 to his name. He left a note with his locker combination taped to the mirror so his brother could clean it out. He was 16 years old, headed to New York City, and absolutely terrified. You won't believe what happened next. New York didn't welcome him. For 8 months, John Travolta got rejected over and over again. Casting directors would wave him off before he even finished reading. He stretched cheap hot dogs into meals and drank water from public fountains. When night came, he slept on borrowed couches, in backstage corners, wherever he could find a spot that wasn't too cold. He was too proud to call home, too stubborn to admit defeat. But the loneliness cut deeper than the hunger ever did. Then, in August 1971, fate showed up in the strangest place, a laundromat. John was folding damp clothes when he overheard 2 actors talking about auditions for a touring production of Grease. He'd never even seen the show. Didn't matter. He walked into that audition and performed like his life depended on it. Because it did. The director saw something in him, some spark that wouldn't quit, and gave him a small role. For the next 11 months, John lived on buses and in cheap hotels, traveling to 47 cities and performing over 300 shows. He made $185 a week, more money than he'd ever seen in his life. But things were about to explode. In 1974, John packed his hopes into a beat-up Oldsmobile and drove west toward California. He had $847 left, When the car broke down, he slept in parking lots. He paid $3 a day to shower at a gym so he could look presentable at auditions he knew he'd probably lose. His first job in Hollywood? Playing an unconscious accident victim on a TV show called Emergency. He was on screen for 47 seconds and got paid $75. Then came a one-line role on another show. These were crumbs, but he took them. Then came the call that changed everything. A casting director needed someone fast for a sitcom pilot. John showed up 23 minutes late, dressed completely wrong. It should have been a disaster. But when the cameras rolled, something clicked. He became Vinnie Barbarino, the wisecracking Brooklyn teen with a smirk that seemed to know more than it should. On September 9, 1975, Welcome Back, Kotter premiered on ABC. Within 6 weeks, John Travolta was getting more than 10,000 fan letters a week. The network had to hire 2 people just to read them all. His catchphrase was everywhere, on t-shirts, stickers, lunchboxes. By Christmas, the merchandise had pulled in $2 million. The boy who once slept in hallways was suddenly famous. Here's where it gets even messier. Fame turned out to be its own kind of trap. Directors saw Vinnie Barbarino and nothing else. When John auditioned for Saturday Night Fever, the director reportedly told him straight up that he didn't want Barbarino in his movie. So John did something that would define his entire approach to acting. He haunted the streets of Brooklyn, watching teenagers at Coney Island, studying their accents, their body language, the way they moved. He was determined to prove he was more than a sitcom character. In 1977, Saturday Night Fever hit theaters. John danced like his life depended on it, and in a way, it did. Those 12-hour rehearsals left his legs shaking and his white suit soaked through with sweat. Some nights he collapsed on the floor between takes. But when the cameras rolled, he carried something beyond rhythm. He carried truth. At 23 years old, John Travolta earned his first Oscar nomination. The boy who'd left New Jersey with $150 had carved his name into cinema history. And then came the bombshell. 1978 brought Grease, and with it, a kind of fame that's hard to even describe now. Danny Zuko wasn't just a character, he was a cultural earthquake. Posters of John covered teenage bedroom walls around the world. The film made over $300 million. At 24, it looked like the world belonged to him. But there was a price. Endless publicity tours, sleepless flights, microphones shoved in his face everywhere he went. Behind the charming smile, exhaustion was eating him alive. And then the roles that had given him everything started to feel like chains. Producers kept offering him the same teenage swagger, the same wisecracking charm. When he reached for something deeper, Hollywood pushed back. This is where it all falls apart. The 1980s nearly destroyed John Travolta's career. In 1983, Staying Alive was supposed to be his triumphant return. Instead, critics tore it apart. The reviews were brutal, mocking, almost personal. He made choices that would haunt him for years. He turned down roles that became defining triumphs for other actors. Parts in American Gigolo, An Officer and a Gentleman, Splash. Instead, he took projects that went nowhere. For the first time, whispers started spreading through Hollywood that maybe John Travolta had peaked too soon. Maybe his time was already over. There were nights, he'd later admit, when he sat alone in hotel rooms, staring at headlines that felt less like notes on a movie and more like rejection of the man behind it. Brace yourself for this one. But here's the thing about John Travolta. He doesn't quit. In 1989, Look Who's Talking became an unexpected hit. It wasn't Shakespeare, but it reminded Hollywood that John Travolta could still draw a crowd. The critics still sneered, calling him a lightweight star, but he survived. Then came 1994 and Quentin Tarantino. Against every studio's doubts, Tarantino saw what the world had forgotten. Not Barbarino, not Danny Zuko, an actor of depth, charm, and danger. Pulp Fiction premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and when it ended, the audience stood and applauded for 6 straight minutes. John Travolta stood on that stage in tears. His second Oscar nomination wasn't nostalgia, it was vindication. "That film saved me," he'd say years later. "It reminded me that I still had something to give." But listen to this. The late 90s brought roles that demanded both grit and grace. Get Shorty, Face Off, Primary Colors. By the end of the decade, his name alone could command $20 million per film. But success has its own costs. Long days that blurred into nights, months away from family, the crushing pressure of carrying studios on his shoulders. And then came Battlefield Earth in 2000. John believed this project could be his great legacy. He poured everything into it, his talent, his reputation, his belief. The film lost tens of millions of dollars and became one of the most mocked movies of the decade. Late-night shows turned it into an easy joke. For a man once celebrated as Hollywood's comeback king, it was devastating. Things went downhill fast. The $20 million paychecks faded. The prestige scripts stopped coming. He found himself in projects released directly to video, shadows of the roles he once commanded. In 2016, The People vs. O.J. Simpson brought him praise for his portrayal of Robert Shapiro. For a moment, hope flickered. But then came Gotti in 2018, which struggled to find an audience and earned near-universal critical rejection. To many, it felt like Hollywood had quietly decided that John Travolta's golden era was behind him. But here's where the truth hits hard. The career ups and downs were painful, but they were nothing compared to what life itself had in store for him. Let's go back to 1976. John was on the set of The Boy in the Plastic Bubble when he met Diana Hyland. She was an accomplished actress, 18 years older than him, cast to play his mother in the film. What started as rehearsed lines turned into something else entirely. Long dinners where conversations stretched past midnight. Flowers left at her door before every shoot. At 22, John had never known love this steady, this certain. They talked about marriage. They dreamed about buying a house together. They joked about names for children they might one day have. "She was the first person who made me believe love could heal," John would later say. And then, total chaos. Diana was fighting breast cancer. She tried to hide it from John at first, wanting to protect him. When he found out, he wouldn't leave her side. He sat by her bed, reading scripts to distract her, singing softly when the pain got sharp, making her laugh even when her body trembled. On March 27, 1977, Diana Hyland died in John's arms. She was 41. He was 23. Just days earlier, he'd packed a white suit for a trip they'd planned to take together. He wore it to her memorial instead. It spirals from here. The grief didn't end at the funeral. Back at his empty home, John found the flowers he'd left for Diana still in their vase, their petals wilted, their scent fading. But the cameras were still calling. He forced himself back to work. He poured his heartbreak into Saturday Night Fever, and every furious dance step became an act of survival. What the world saw as the swagger of Tony Manero was really the grief of John Travolta, channeled into movement, transformed into art. This next part left everyone stunned. Barely a year after losing Diana, the same cruel disease came back, this time for his mother. In 1978, just as Grease was conquering the world, Helen Travolta was secretly fighting breast cancer. She told no one, not even John. She hid her pain so her son could walk the red carpet without shadows clouding his smile. "She wanted me to enjoy my moment," John would later say, even while she was slipping away. When he finally learned the truth, it was already late. He rushed home whenever he could, sitting by her bedside, singing to her, reading lines as if they were still in that classroom where she'd once taught him to dream. On December 3, 1978, Helen lost her battle. She was the second woman John loved stolen by breast cancer in less than 2 years. And that's when the tables turned. For years after, John carried those losses quietly. But eventually, light found its way back in. He met Kelly Preston in 1987 on a movie set. Their connection was instant but complicated. She was married at the time. Years passed. Paths crossed again. And what began as friendship grew into something neither of them could deny. On New Year's Eve 1991, in the snowy Swiss Alps, John dropped to one knee. Fireworks exploded across the midnight sky as he placed a diamond ring on her hand. Kelly said yes. Their wedding in Paris looked like something from a romance film. A second ceremony in Florida sealed it at home. For a man who had buried so much, this felt like redemption. In 1992, their first child arrived. Jet wasn't just a baby, he was a miracle. John cradled him close and whispered, "You're my light." 8 years later, in 2000, Ella joined the family. Photographers captured the glamorous snapshots, the family arriving hand in hand at premieres, vacations where everyone wore matching outfits. But behind the glossy images was something deeper. Mornings with pancake stacks, afternoons of backyard games, evenings curled under blankets watching movies together. "The best role I ever had," John told a friend, "was being a husband and a father." Now here's where it gets insane. Jet had been diagnosed with Kawasaki disease as a toddler, a rare condition that left him prone to seizures. John and Kelly built their lives around protecting him, choosing privacy over pity. On January 2, 2009, during a family vacation in the Bahamas, the unimaginable happened. Jet suffered a seizure in the bathroom, fell, and struck his head. John raced down the hall and found his son collapsed. He dropped to his knees and performed CPR, tears falling onto his boy's face as he begged him to come back. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Jet was gone at 16 years old. "There is no pain like this," John would later say. "It doesn't go away, it just lives inside you." The real chaos starts here. As if the grief weren't enough, strangers tried to exploit the tragedy. An extortion scheme emerged, attempting to blackmail the family for $25 million by threatening to expose details of Jet's final moments. The trial dragged on, forcing John and Kelly to relive their worst day in a courtroom. For months afterward, John disappeared from public life. He poured everything into Kelly and Ella, forcing himself to rise each morning because they still needed him. Then, in 2010, against all odds, hope returned. Kelly became pregnant at 47. In November, Benjamin was born. "Our miracle baby," John called him. "It was like God gave us a reason to keep going. It turns darker from here." In 2018, breast cancer returned to John Travolta's life one more time. Kelly was diagnosed. The same disease that had taken Diana, the same disease that had taken his mother. Now it was coming for his wife. Kelly chose to fight in silence, determined to protect Ella and Benjamin from fear. John became her caretaker, her shadow, her soldier. Night after night he sat by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering promises into the silence. On July 12, 2020, Kelly Preston died. She was 57 years old. 3 women, 3 pillars of his life, all claimed by the same shadow. That's when everything unraveled. The losses kept coming. 2 months after Kelly's death, John's younger half-brother Sam died suddenly at 52. 2 funerals within weeks. In August 2022, Olivia Newton-John, his beloved co-star from Grease, lost her own battle with breast cancer. She'd been a friend for over 40 years. "My dearest Olivia," John wrote in his tribute, "you made all of our lives so much better. Your impact was incredible. I love you so much. We will see you down the road." Only months later, Kirstie Alley, his co-star from Look Who's Talking, and friend of more than 30 years, was also gone. Cancer claimed her too. By the end of 2022, John Travolta was a man living among ghosts. In just 3 years, he had buried his wife, his brother, and 2 cherished friends. When he looked further back, the weight became almost unbearable. Diana, his mother, Kelly, Olivia, Kirstie, Jet, Sam. 7 people he loved, gone. Here's where the mask falls off. So what does John Travolta do now, at 71, after all of that? He keeps going. His children are his anchors. Ella has grown into a young woman who carries both her mother's grace and her father's charisma. She's followed him into the spotlight, appearing in films and pursuing music. She calls him her hero. Benjamin, the miracle born after Jet's death, is now 13. He and John play tennis together, swim in the Florida sun, fly planes side by side. John posts glimpses of their bond online, Smiling snapshots of a boy chasing life with a father determined to be there for every step. "My children are my lifeline," John has said. "They keep me going." And this is the truth he's admitted. Has he found love again? Since Kelly's death, he's kept his heart guarded. Rumors swirl, as they always do with celebrities, but John has never confirmed any of them. "I owe it to my children to be present," he said. For now, he chooses companionship in family, in friendships, in memories too sacred to replace. Materially, he remains one of Hollywood's wealthiest stars, with a net worth estimated between $250 and $260 million. His estate in Ocala, Florida sits on a private runway, where he can step out his front door and board his own jet. He's donated aircraft to historical preservation societies. He still pilots smaller planes himself, a lifelong dream turned daily reality. But the fortune isn't what defines him anymore. In memory of Jet, he and Kelly founded the John Travolta Foundation, which supports children with special needs, education programs, and medical research. He rarely seeks publicity for these efforts. For John, philanthropy isn't a headline, it's a form of healing. The final truth. At 71, John Travolta no longer chases youth. The thick hair of his disco years has given way to a clean-shaven head that's become his signature. His posture is still regal. His presence still fills a room. When he steps onto a red carpet today, the cameras don't turn to capture a fading idol. They turn to honor a man who carries his scars as armor and his survival as a crown. His life has become something larger than fame, larger than cinema. It's a living testament carved in tragedy. He's reminded us that even when fate is merciless, even when shadows steal every light you have, love is still worth the risk, even if the cost is everything. So here's my question for you. What's the John Travolta performance that meant the most to you? Was it the Disco King in Saturday Night Fever? The leather jacket rebel in Grease? The smooth-talking hitman in Pulp Fiction? Or something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you, if you felt something watching a man carry this much loss and still keep going, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this coming. Stories about the real people behind the famous faces.